1867, par un matin d'été, le 1er juillet, notre pays est né.
Les pères s'entendirent sur l'avenir de la nation pour que tous et chacun puissent chanter ton nom.
D'une famille de 4 à 10, nous sommes passés. Sir John et MacDonald et ses associés.
Gardons la tête haute et ensemble chantons. Canada, nous sommes si fiers de ton nom.
Mesdames et messieurs, bonsoir et bienvenue à une autre émission d'Informez-vous avec Jacques. Ce soir, jeudi le 5 février, nous avons le plaisir de vous présenter l'émission d'information sur l'expansion possible de la route 1774. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to Informez-vous avec Jacques. This evening is an information session that occurred for the expansion of Highway 17 174, which took place on February 5th. It's a fairly long evening, so I hope you will get as much information as I did. Bonne écoute.
Bonsoir, good evening. My name is Marc Clermont. I'm the Director of Public Works for United Hills Prescott Russell. Je suis directeur des travaux publics pour les côtés du Prescott Russell. Bienvenue à la deuxième session des portes ouvertes pour l'étude environnementale pour le chemin de comté numéro 17 et le chemin Highway 74 à Ottawa. Et puis ce soir, il y a aussi l'étude du train léger. Donc, c'est deux études séparées qui sont coordonnées ensemble parce que ça a un impact directement sur l'option de l'automatisation du freeway. Excusez, des fois, je parle moitié français, moitié anglais. S'il y a des questions, je ne vous pas. If you have any questions, feel free. We'll be trained. If most of the presentation will be bilingual. Presenters, some will be in French, some will be in English. The slides, les acétates. Un côté à ma droite, c'est la section anglaise, puis ma section à gauche, ça va être la section française. N'importe quand vous avez une question, if you have any questions, feel free to ask them in the language of your choice. Same thing, si vous avez des questions, gênez-vous pas, posez la question dans la langue de votre choix. Je vais présenter, je vais souligner la présence de M. Ducaire, maire d'Alfred Plantagenet. Il n'y a pas beaucoup de membres du conseil de Clarence-Rockland, je pense, sont très occupés à faire le budget. C'est un... j'ai fait... Oh, excusez, M. Lalonde, excusez. M. Jean-Marc Lalonde est ici, conseiller de Cité Clarence-Rockland. J'ai fait exprès d'appeler la municipalité, voir quand les réunions publiques étaient, puis c'est les mardis, donc on l'a fait le jeudi, mais ils ont fait des sessions budget. They have budget meetings, very important. So, further ado, sorry? Oui, je vais présenter l'équipe. We'll present the team, or they'll present themselves. They're old enough to do that.
I'm Valerie McGurr from AECOM, and I'm the project manager for these studies.
Bonsoir, mon nom est Patrick Léo, je suis avec la firme MMM, groupe MMM Ingénieur Conseil.
Hi, I'm Angela Taylor with the City of Ottawa. I'm the project manager for the two projects. We're competing with a fun group over there.
I'm Samantha Sabo. I'm an environmental planner with Parsons, one of the consultants heavily involved in both these projects.
I'm David Hopper. I'm the project manager looking after the western section with the LRT integrated with the freeway widening.
Kelly Roberts, environmental planner with Jacques.
Je vous transfère Angela Taylor.
Thanks, Mark. So from here, we're going to talk about the overview, I believe. Okay, there we go. So I just want to briefly talk about what we're going to go through. We're going to look at the study objectives and why we're here. We're going to look at the study process, and as Mark mentioned, there are 2 evaluation assessment processes happening at the same time. I feel like I'm competing with that noise. Is everybody okay? Okay, good. We'll also look at the timelines of the study. We'll quickly talk about the evaluation methodology, and that way you get an understanding of how we came up with our preferred solutions. We have divided the study into 2 distinct sections. So we've got the section west of Trim from Highway 417 to Trim Road, and that includes the light rail corridor, and then east of Trim from Trim to Clarence Rockland, which includes the road widening. And we'll also talk about the preferred plans of those sections, and we'll talk about next steps leading to the conclusion of our study. So next, here's our study area, and so you've seen this before. We were here 2 years ago. Our study is looking at the limits from the Highway 417 split in Ottawa to Clarence Rockland, and it's about a 34-kilometer corridor. If you look at the 174 and Highway 17, there's about 24 kilometers in Ottawa and about 10 kilometers in Clarence Rockland. And from Highway 417 split to Trim Road is a freeway, so it's a 4-lane freeway with controlled access. And east of Trim, it's a 2-lane rural corridor. It does widen out to 4 lanes in Rockland in some of the urban areas. This is a study that we've partnered with Prescott Russell, so we're co-proponents in the environmental assessment study, and it is funded by MTO funding for the study. So the study objectives, we're doing an environmental assessment because as part of provincial legislation, in order to widen a road or build new infrastructure such as transit or light rail, we need to undertake an environmental assessment study. So we're carrying out these studies to obtain approval to extend the light rail corridor from Blair Road to Trim Station with 8 stations, as well as improving and widening the 174 Highway 17. So it would be to 6 lanes to Trim Road and then 4 lanes from Trim to Clarence Rockland. So there were some policy changes that happened in the city of Ottawa. In 2013, we underwent an official plan review, and I think similar to what Prescott Russell or Clarence Rockland did as well. So the official plan was updated, and that included the supporting transportation master plan. So we updated our growth projections, we updated our development plans, and as part of that, we actually looked at a new transportation master plan that identified new transit infrastructure, road infrastructure, as well as pedestrian and cycling infrastructure. So what you're seeing here is the ultimate transit network, and it's the long-term vision for the city of Ottawa. So you'll see the light rail in red, and you'll see the bus rapid transit in blue, the dark blue, and then you'll see the bus transit priorities in the lighter blues. You'll see where it's grayed out is our light rail extension from Blair all the way to Trim Road, and that's within the ultimate and long-term vision of the city of Ottawa. So next we have the affordable transit network, and that is now the transit network that the city can afford. So one of the key principles that the city developed in the transportation master plan was making sustainability and other modes of transportation a priority. So we're looking at transit, we're looking at pedestrian and cycling. So in addition to that, sorry, the noise is really distracting. So in addition to that, in the affordability, what we did was we developed a financial model. So the financial model looked at how much funding we would receive for transit, how much funding for roads, and how much funding for pedestrian and cyclists. And within that funding, it was a very limited amount of funding, and we couldn't afford to build everything that was identified in the ultimate transit network. So we ranked and prioritized the projects. The high priority projects received received the funding that was allocated, and that's what is identified in the affordable transit network. So what you see here is light rail that extends to the west, to the south, and to the east, which is part of our study, which is the extension from Blair to Place d'Orleans. So that is going to be built within the 2031 timeframe, and the mayor actually has committed to having it operational by 2023, subject to provincial and federal funding, and that's part of what we call the Stage 2 package of light rail extensions. So now we look at the ultimate road network, and again, the city looked at the growth projections to the planning horizon of 2031. It looked at where development was going to happen, and based on that growth, it identified a road network based on the needs of where we needed to support that growth and development. So here's the ultimate road network with the long-term vision, and you can see the widening of the 174 is required from the split all the way to the city's eastern border of Canaan. Then we look at the city's affordable plan, and what can we afford? We couldn't afford to build the ultimate network by 2031 because we don't have a big pocket of funding. So with the limited funding that we had, again, we ranked the projects, we prioritized it, the higher priority projects received the funding, and that's what you're seeing here. So you'll see road improvements and widening that needs to happen in all parts of the city, but you don't see the widening of the 174 there. So unfortunately, that falls off of the affordability envelope. Now, when the road network was developed, they also considered the transit network. So because in the east, Orleans ended up getting the light rail transit extension to Place d'Orleans, Canada did not get the light rail to Canada. So they decided that they would invest more in transit because Orleans actually has the highest user of transit. So that's why they invested in transit in that area. And Canada is only getting little improvements that had already been planned. I will try. Now that you've heard about our transit changes and our road network changes, so now our study area west of Trim from the Highway 417 split to Trim Road does include the light rail corridor. And as you can see, our study area extends to Trim Road. So we're going to look at a light rail widening to Trim Road, but it will actually terminate at Place d'Orleans by 2031. So we don't really know what the timing is beyond Place d'Orleans for that. So from here, I'm going to turn it over to David.
Great, thank you, Angela. So the reason we're doing the two of these studies together is to make sure that we're planning them in a way that is very cost effective. We're going to take maximum use of the corridor, minimize impact on the environment, and also look to minimize construction costs, because we don't want to do something on the LRT project that makes it harder to widen the highway or the other way around. We're also looking at building on existing studies that have been done. There has been some planning for a BRT extension further east that we've looked at. And we're also integrating the stakeholder consultation so that we don't have to come to you twice, once to talk about the road and once to talk about the transit. Let's just bundle them together and discuss both at the same time. And it helps streamline the environmental assessment process. In Ontario, if you're looking at widening a highway, you have to follow a Class EA process. And the class process allows you to scope down, because widening a highway has very predictable impacts on the environment, and they're very similar every time you widen the road, so you can go in a very consistent process all the way through. And we're down at the end of the selection of the preferred design stage, so later tonight Valerie is going to be talking about the highway portion east of Trim, and I'll be talking about the highway west of Trim and how it's integrated. And then we'll be showing the confirmation of what all the issues were and what mitigation we're talking about and what the preferred plan is moving forward. The LRT project, oh, yes sir. A Class EA has a shelf life of 10 years. So you have to begin some portion of the work within 10 years. Or if you wait longer than that, you may have to do a refresh which is a shorter version where you go back and look and see where some of the existing conditions have changed and whether that would change your solution. But once you've started something, then the EA stays valid for the whole rest of the project that was studied. So the question is, if we're not doing anything till 2031, will we have to start again? We're not sure that we may not be able to start something, and one of the things we're going to be exploring is whether, and we'll see it when we get further into the LRT, is that it may make some sense to do some of the widening of the highway now to help build the LRT, the same way the highway is being widened west of Blair to allow the conversion of the transitway to LRT. So that would lock the study in. So that's one of the things we're trying to do. And also having the EA in place allows us to control development and control planning differently and acquire property from willing partners as the time moves along so that it's easier to implement in the future. So both are reasons why we want to get the study on the books and approved now. So the transit projects follow a slightly different process. Until 2008, you had to go through a full individual EA for a transit project. And the problem was it was taking the Ministry of the Environment 5 to 6 years to approve the project after the study was completed. So the municipalities lobbied to have a similar class process developed, and it's called the Transit Project Assessment Process. And it is a 185-day period after you finish your pre-planning work. So we finish all the consultation and the pre-planning that we're doing tonight and we'll do through the spring. When you drop the notice of commencement, the agencies that have some jurisdiction over the project have 120 days to review your report and comment on it. The final comments are rolled into a document that then has a 30-day public review period, followed by 35 days for the minister to approve the project or to ask the proponent to do more work. So it's a very well-defined process which is working out very well for municipalities in Ontario. So the evaluation methodology that we're using for this study is really a planning tool, and so we're using this as a way to not only develop but to evaluate our alternatives. And the methodology has been designed to address a couple of things. One is we're going to have a set of criteria. So we're going to set out some objective measures of what will make this project successful, or what things we think are important in the environment to differentiate one potential solution from another. The second factor is to weight or give some rating or ranking to those criteria. For instance, in the section through Central Orleans, we're in a pretty much urbanized corridor, so there's not as many natural environmental impacts as there are further east. There's no agricultural land that comes into play. There's different geotechnical issues. So in some cases, the different criteria will have a higher weighting east of Trim than west of Trim. And as well, the transit criteria will have a different weighting for things in the western sector. And the third thing is sensitivity analysis. So sometimes we do these big evaluations and we put all the numbers into a spreadsheet and it comes out with an answer, but we have to step back and say, does that answer make sense? So we're doing a series of sensitivity tests to go through the numbers and see how robust our solution is by testing some of our assumptions. So the way they do that is called the concordance method. And in concordance, you can compare different factors for different options without knowing the exact impact. All you need to know is that one option is better than the other and ranks higher than the other ones. So you can compare number 1 to number 2, number 1 to number 3, number 2 to number 3, and say this one performs better, so it gets the points. This one doesn't perform as well, it doesn't get the points. You do that comparing each alternative to each other alternative for every criteria, and then we add it up at the end and see what the answer is. And we'll get to that in a few minutes. So in the area west of Trim, I'm going to talk about the different alignment alternatives that we've covered off, the evaluation criteria and weights we've used, and what result we came up with, the results of our sensitivity analysis, as well as how we came up with the hybrid option that you saw on the wall there earlier, which is a bit of a combination of two different alternatives. So when we're looking at integrating LRT with the freeway corridor, there's really two places we can be. We can either be off to the side of the highway, or we can be in the middle of the highway. In this slide, we can see that if we're off to the side of the highway, we would widen the freeway into the middle using the swale that's there today, put a concrete barrier in the middle, and widen the lanes into the middle of the highway, and then put the LRT on one side or the other. At the stations, previous slide, at the stations, we have a 10-meter wide platform and then a train on either side. And in those platforms, we would have stairs and elevators to go up to the road overhead or to a pedestrian bridge. And in between the stations, we need a little bit less space. We need about 10.5 meters in order to get the two running tracks in. The LRT would also be separated from the highway by another concrete barrier with a fence on top of it, because we don't want those trains getting out and playing havoc with the freeway traffic. Our third alternative is to put the LRT in the median of the highway, in which case we would have the platform in the middle and the trains on the outside of that. That will take up all of the space that we have in the middle of the highway. So the widening of the highway would have to be to the outside. In between the stations, where we have the narrower requirement for the running way, we would still have a little bit of room left in the median, so we would widen the highway partially into the middle and partially to the outside. So we actually end up with a smaller overall footprint in the middle because we're using the median very effectively. So there were three alternatives, and really it's the story of Goldilocks. The alternative on the north side of the highway is a little too hot. We've got a whole bunch of interchanges where it's hard to squeeze through, a whole bunch of new bridges we need. On the south side, it's a little bit too cold. Not only do we have all the interchange problems, but there's the hydro wires that run along the south side of the highway. And while we have electric trains, they don't like to be too close to electric wires that aren't their own. And the Goldilocks solution is to be right down the middle of the freeway, so that your stations are halfway between the people on the north side and the south side. It's easy for people on the arterial roads crossing the highway to get on and off buses to go down into the stations. And so, let's flip to the next slide. So we'll get to the details of that in a minute, but I want to just touch on the evaluation criteria that we've used. There's 6 major families of criteria. The first is about the social environment. How does it impact archaeology, noise and vibration, property impacts? Are we compatible with the land use around us? What about views and vistas across the Greenbelt? And is it supportive of the city's objectives for smart growth? Our second group is around transportation. Is this a safe facility to operate and maintain and to use? Is it compatible with the transit network and the other bus routes that are going to tie into it? Is it good for developing ridership? Are the stations in the right place? How can we get pedestrians and cyclists in and out of the stations? And is it compatible with the road network around it? The third grouping is about infrastructure. So what other municipal infrastructure is in the way? There's a big water main being built on the north side of the highway today. There's the hydro on the south side, but there's a whole bunch of other utilities for drainage and sewage underneath, as well as major structures of where the bridges are at all the existing interchanges. We look at cost, both the capital cost of building it and the ongoing operating cost. For every dollar we spend building a light rail system, we'll spend $20 maintaining it over its lifetime. So we want to make sure that what we build is effective and efficient to maintain, so that it's easy to keep that investment fresh for the future. On the biological environment, we look at all the natural heritage features, the aquatic environment, any wildlife, any species at risk, any habitat that's put at risk by the project. And on the physical list, it's a little bit shorter for this part of the project. There's only a small area along Greens Creek where we have some unstable slope issues where we need to be concerned about widening the embankment in the Greenbelt. The criteria weights were developed by the study team and the city staff. And when we look at everyone's opinions on there, about 41% of the weight goes to the transportation factors, and 19% go to the social factors. Those are the two biggest determinants of the success of a project for transit. And what we do after we've run the complete analysis, pop ahead, Val, and put it through the concordance engine, is that the median alternative compared to both the north and the south ranks quite a bit higher. So on virtually every criteria that we use to evaluate it, putting the LRT in the middle and widening the highway a little bit to either side always is the most preferable option. So then we wanted to test our assumptions. Is this reasonable? So we did a bunch of sensitivity analysis where we said, okay, what if every criteria is of equal weight? What if we take out all of the social factors and just look at everything else? What if we put those back and take out all the transportation factors? What if we put those back and take out all the biological factors? And no matter which way we sliced and diced the numbers, the median solution always ranked number one. So for that reason, we believe we have a very robust solution, and we think it is the right solution for where LRT should go to extend out to Trim Road. What we did find, though, was that there was a small portion of the alignment between Blair Station and Greens Creek, Montreal Road area, where there's a preference to be on the north side of the highway. Primarily at Montreal Road, because all of the development is to the north side of the highway, the Canatech Business Park and the development, and then the south side is Greens Creek, and the Greens Creek corridor doesn't really generate too much transit ridership. We put the LRT on the north side of the highway. That will also allow us to take advantage of the dip in the highway at Greens Creek to bring the LRT up and over and drop into the middle of the highway. It also makes it easier for us to get out of Blair Station and stay on the north side of the highway. So for that reason, we're proposing that the ultimate solution here is a hybrid, where the LRT would come out of Blair Station and stay on the north side of the highway, have a station at Montreal Road on the north side of the highway, jump into the median at Greens Creek, and run out in the median of the highway all the way out to Trim Road. So let's just go on to the station examples. So what would a station look like at Jeanne d'Arc or Place d'Orleans, where it's out in the middle of the freeway? There are a number of examples, and I'm going to show you two tonight. This one is on the Crowchild Trail in northwest Calgary. We can see the white concrete areas are for the pedestrians to access the bridges that take you out to the station in the center of the freeway. There's a station house at the top where you can stand and wait and see the train approaching before you go down to get to the train. So if there's not very many people around and you don't want to be down out at platform level by yourself, you can wait up at the bridge level. Part of the platform is enclosed for inclement weather, and then part of it is open for the 3 weeks in the spring and the 3 weeks in the fall when it's nice to stand outside. And then we would have pedestrian bridges spanning across to make sure we could serve the development on both sides of the highway. Now this example of Calgary, these are actually open bridges, and we're not sure whether they're hardier than people in Ottawa or just crazier, but their winters are quite a bit different. They don't get the same heavy wet snow, and it doesn't accumulate the same way as it does here, and they don't get freezing rain the way we do. So they can live with these open bridges, but in Ottawa, they'll be closed the way they are today at Place d'Orleans and Blair and the other bridges. The other example is what's being proposed out for Lincoln Field Station on the Western Confederation line. And that is to actually put the platform underneath the Carling Avenue Bridge over the Pinecrest Creek corridor. And you would have a station house on the north side and the south side of Carling Avenue. So buses coming along would stop directly in front of the station. You'd get off the bus, walk right into the station, and then go down to the platform. And then the same thing when you come back up to the side of the street where you want to catch the bus, and the bus stop is right there. Yes. So the question is, what's going to happen if there's an emergency in the station and we need to get emergency services to the location? We are working very closely with the emergency services on how we do that. And in most cities, like in the Calgary examples, the emergency services would actually access not from the freeway level, but from the arterial road crossing the highway. So all of their access would be down through the station and down to the platform. So we wouldn't have to block the highway if there's an accident at track level. A lot of the incidents on LRT at track level are usually one person who's ill. So a lot of that slows down the train. A staff person would take that person off the train and wait for an ambulance to come, but that would be served from up above. If there were an actual train fire, for instance, and that's sort of the worst case scenario, the train, there is access between the stations. There is a designated walkway space, so if we have to evacuate a train, a staff member would lead people along the track from the train to the nearest station and take them out. Emergency services would go to the nearest station and come down to assist with that. If there were something like a train fire, which is extremely rare, there has only been a train fire on the subway in Toronto once in 50 years. So I mean, these are very low likely events. If there were, then yes. If it was a catastrophic event, then yes, emergency services would respond at freeway level, the same way as if a school bus turned over or if there was a truck fire on the highway. So in that case, they would trump running the highway and would shut it down to be able to get access to it. But we are working with emergency services so that they know they're not going to have the U-turn capability on the highway either. They're going to have to go up and use the interchanges to go back in the other direction. So we're working through all of those issues with them in the design process. So that's sort of the end of the west section. So we are planning for a widening of the freeway to allow for a third lane. That lane could be designated as what we call HOV, or a high occupancy vehicle. So it may be restricted to people who have at least 2 people in their car, possibly 3 people in the car, so that they have some priority over single occupancy drivers who are stuck in the other 2 lanes. We are making sure we have enough space for that, but it'll be up to somebody in the future to decide whether that's what's actually implemented. But there is enough room in the corridor to do that without affecting the Greenbelt lands and without having major impacts at a lot of the freeway interchanges. So before we move to the east section, I just wanted to wrap up. Are there any other questions about the freeway portion or the LRT portion that I could handle before we move on? Yes, sir. Yeah, so the question is whether the Clarence transport system will tie in or how it will operate once this is running. My understanding is that that's still in discussion, but the intention that I understand is when the first phase of the Confederation line opens from Blair to Tunney's Pasture, the intention is for the Clarence-Rockland transit buses to stop there and transfer people onto the LRT system. And then when it's extended to Place d'Orleans, the CRT buses would stop at wherever the end of the rail line is, so that the Clarence-Rockland buses will not run in further paralleling the transit or paralleling the light rail for a couple of reasons. One, there is no dedicated transit way anymore, so you would just be in freeway traffic. And secondly, the freeway is too busy, so you're not going to have enough capacity. Secondly, if Clarence-Rockland Transit stops at Place d'Orleans, those buses can go back and make another trip in the morning with the same number of bus operating hours. So it can become more effective for more people from Clarence-Rockland to come in. I'm only here looking at the infrastructure and how it will integrate, and that there's a place for you to be there. Like Angela said, the discussions on fares and fare integration and all that, that's a little bit above my pay grade. But we would make sure that there is the capacity, definitely put those comments in for sure. We would definitely make sure there is room at the terminal station for Clarence-Rockland Transit to be served. Whether the fares are integrated is a question that will have to be answered closer to opening day and depends on a whole bunch of other factors. Yes, sir. So will the frequency of the trains east of Blair and west of Blair be the same? I would say in the morning rush hour, yes. In the afternoon rush hour, probably. And in the middle of the day, if enough of you ride it. Basically what they're trying to do is the same as the bus service today. You have a number of, I come out from downtown to go to my office at Saint Laurent, and there's a whole bunch of 95s, and 5 out of 7 of them only go as far as Herdman, and 1 goes to Blair and 1 goes to Trim. So it's the same kind of thing. So there will be a turn-back operation at Blair, so there may be in the middle of the day half as many trains go out to Place d'Orleans as go to Blair. But if the ridership is there, then the train frequency will stay the same. So that will all be balanced once we see what the ridership is and how the loading standards are met in order to keep up the cost recovery ratio. So I'd now like to turn it over to Patrick to work on the highway portion.
Bonsoir tout le monde. Mon collègue David nous a bien présenté, bien expliqué la première partie. Ici, on vient du centre-ville d'Ottawa pour aller jusqu'à Trim ou Place d'Orléans. Mais la cité de Clarence-Rockland, c'est aussi un centre urbain en développement, en croissance, où il y a beaucoup de choses qui se passent et il y a beaucoup de déplacements Je préférais pas me mettre au milieu, mais je pense que je vais être obligé. Voilà. Bon, il y a donc beaucoup de déplacements entre les centres-villes d'Ottawa et la cité. Donc, c'est aussi nécessaire de planifier pour le long terme, planifier pour le futur, de planifier pour l'avenir. Et ça, quand on habite dans la cité de Clarence-Rockland, qu'est-ce qu'on fait le matin? On a vraiment deux choix. On a celui-là de prendre votre excellent système de transport en commun pour les heures de pointe et d'aller jusqu'au centre-ville, dans les deux centres-villes, en fait, de la région, ou alors de prendre sa voiture. Le développement du réseau routier, ce n'est pas nécessairement uniquement pour les automobilistes, ça peut aussi être très avantageux pour le transport en commun. Donc, c'est des investissements qui, je pense, vont dans les deux sens. Alors, les deux processus d'évaluation environnementale que David vient de décrire et puis celui-là sont très semblables. Ils ont été intégrés, donc ils utilisent les mêmes méthodologies, la même approche, la même façon d'analyser les choses, mais évidemment avec des critères très différents. Alors ce soir, on va vous présenter les options de tracé qui ont été retenues pour cette région, pour ce corridor-là, vous décrire les critères d'évaluation, la façon dont l'analyse a été faite, le résultat aussi, les conclusions. Alors donc tout ça va être fait exactement sur le même modèle que David. Donc le secteur à l'étude est assez simple. De l'ouest vers l'est, si vous voulez, commence à Trim, donc exactement où arrêterait la dernière station du train léger, pour aller jusqu'au chemin Landry du côté est de la cité Clarence-Rockland, et de nord en sud de la rivière des Outaouais jusqu'à la limite d'un corridor Innis Baseline. Donc un corridor qui est assez large, dans lequel on peut faire rentrer 3-4 scénarios, 3-4 options de travail. Donc, on n'a pas regardé juste uniquement le corridor de la Seine.
Le GF Show, c'est quoi?
Bienvenue au GF Show, c'est un tout nouveau TV show, on va dire. Ah ouais, vas-y, let's go! Je sais pas si vous allez me trouver pas. Bienvenue tout le monde au GF Show, c'est un tout nouveau TV show. Vous allez voir que je suis pas que numéro. On va avoir du fun, oh ouais, go! Bienvenue tout le monde.
Le GF Show, c'est de l'humour, c'est de l'entertainment, du divertissement, des sketchs, des parodies, des conneries, des observations, des chroniques et j'en passe. Le GF Show, c'est tout! C'est n'importe quoi! C'est pour vous autres, c'est à DBC22 que c'est chaud! Ne le manquez pas!
Mesdames et messieurs, bienvenue au GF Show.
Donc, effectivement, de Trim jusqu'au chemin Landry, de la rivière des Outaouais jusqu'au corridor de Baseline. Alors, donc, un corridor assez large pour pouvoir examiner au moins 3 à 4 options de tracé pour déplacer les gens. Je pense qu'on peut aller on peut passer là maintenant. Vous avez donc la zone d'étude. Alors, il y a une chose qui est générale aux 4 scénarios qui vont être montrés. Premièrement, c'est l'ajout d'une voie continue dans chaque direction. Ça, c'est important parce que dans le cas de la 1774, ça veut dire de faire un réseau à 4 voies, 2 dans chaque direction. Et dans le cas des nouvelles routes, d'avoir au moins une voie par direction. Comme vous allez le voir, il y a certaines options qui impliquent de construire des routes dans du terrain où il n'y a pas encore de corridor routier. Dans tous les cas, l'exercice... Oui, monsieur. Je pense que c'est une question que plusieurs personnes ont et si vous voulez bien, on peut la discuter peut-être après la présentation. Parce qu'essentiellement, on peut avoir une petite discussion autour de ça, là. Mais ce serait une voie réversible, dans le fond, entre Ottawa et puis la région ici. Alors, mais je reviendrai là-dessus à la fin de la présentation avec des commentaires de Valérie en particulier. Donc, dans des cas, 2 voies dans chaque direction ou alors dans le cas de la 17 et de la 174, 4 voies. Une autre chose qui serait commune à toutes les améliorations qui seraient faites, ce serait d'avoir des accotements pavés. Je pense qu'à l'heure actuelle, autant à Ottawa que partout au Québec, la plupart des ministères de transport, quand ils réalisent un nouveau réseau routier, ils prennent de plus en plus l'habitude de paver les accotements. de façon, entre autres, à faciliter les déplacements en vélo, le transport actif de façon générale. Alors donc, ce serait quelque chose qui serait fait dans le cadre des améliorations ici. Et aussi, il y aurait des installations. Ce n'est pas tout de paver les accotements. Il faut aussi qu'il y ait de la signalisation, des mesures de mitigation de la vitesse, des installations pour faciliter les déplacements en transport actif. Alors, Alors là, notre région s'est un petit peu élargie, là, mais on va la décrire avec un petit peu plus de détails. Donc, en partant du chemin Trim, un des corridors, c'est effectivement celui-là qui longe la rivière des Outaouais jusqu'à son entrée dans la cité Clarence-Rockland. C'est donc un réseau routier existant qui passe dans des communautés où il y a déjà des résidences le long du réseau, ainsi de suite. Le réseau en bleu serait un réseau qui serait beaucoup plus, qui encrocherait beaucoup plus sur du terrain où il n'y a pas encore de réseau routier, donc en partant du chemin Trim et qui ferait une oblique principalement au sud de Wheelhaven, dans un corridor qui serait au sud de la promenade Wheelhaven et qui serait dans un territoire essentiellement non bâti encore jusqu'à ce qu'il rejoigne Baseline. Le troisième scénario, la troisième option, donc partirait serait une prolongation, une amélioration du corridor de Ennis, qui en partie longerait un réseau routier existant, mais qui aussi entre Dunning et Canaan serait une nouvelle voie routière. Il reprendrait le baseline existant. Donc, trois options très différentes. Une qui est plus dans un milieu urbanisé, une qui est dans un milieu agricole, une qui utilise un réseau existant. Là, j'aimerais demander à Valérie d'aller un petit peu plus dans le détail pour caractériser ces trois corridors-là.
Merci, Patrick. So these four routes, we have alternative one, the widening of 174-17, which is along, as you know, an existing transportation route, and therefore there are driveways, there are intersections, there is a wide variety of land uses all along the corridor, including built-up areas in Cumberland and in Rockland. Along Alternative 2, which is our Trim Willhaven, the blue route, we first go past the Old Montreal Road and up the Cardinal Creek Valley, which is also up the escarpment in that area. And that is, of course, a very difficult area to get up with appropriate cut and fill, so there would be disturbance to the Cardinal Creek Valley. Then we cut across the farmland and behind the rural residences along Willhaven and come back over to, then we join Willhaven right east of Beckett's Creek, which is just in East Cumberland here. And just at Canaan Road, then we have a realignment to eliminate the jog between Willhaven and Baseline Road and continue along Baseline Road, which will require as well a realignment at the La Casse escarpment that you're, I'm sure, familiar with. The fourth or the third alternative, we have Innis Baseline, is a continuation from the new Trim Road, Frank Kenny, Innis intersection along Innis Road, which of course again is through a rural area with some driveways and adjacent farms. It then, at Dunning, there is the end of Innis Road. There is a small gravel road between Dunning and Sarsfield, and then we would have a new two-lane route all the way from Sarsfield, and this would go behind the homes that are along Willhaven and would join Baseline Road at Canaan Road, and then becomes the same as the Trim Baseline route. So There are a number of farms and driveways also along Baseline Road. And as I mentioned, there are rural residents in the Lacasse escarpment where the road realignment would require significant cuts and fills to produce a road that is to the appropriate standard. The options, all of them are 2 lanes, except for the widening of 174-17. Requirement for intersection control will be looked at in this next phase of our study, and the next time we come back to you in the spring, we'll indicate where we believe traffic lights are required, or roundabouts, or signals. Certainly that may be some years in the future, but at this point what we needed and what we identified as required was 1 additional lane of capacity in each direction. So that is either taking the 2 lanes on 174-17 and making it 4 lanes, or providing the 2 lanes on 174-17 and another 2 lanes elsewhere in the network. Okay, if you didn't hear this, the gentleman is suggesting that a 4-lane alternative of trim Willhaven Baseline would be his preference. So this gentleman is asking, what happens when you get to Trim Road here? You still have to go somewhere, and that's absolutely right. In fact, the transportation modeling shows that most people will want to get back to 174 to carry on. So this would require, we expect, additional widening of Trim Road to handle the extra volume of traffic. Certainly we looked at a number, during the previous phase of our study, we looked at a number of routes to try to find a way to get back, and those darn escarpments get in the way of a lot of things.
Anyway, my point was, it's too bad you didn't show the points.
You're very good, thank you. Thank you. It should maybe have a dashed line up here. Thanks, I'll make a note of that. We certainly have as good a tool as we have in the transportation demand forecast modeling, where we update our population employment projections. The City of Ottawa gets information from Clarence Rockland and other places so that they can put as good a data as they can into the modeling and into the decision making. I'm sorry, I understand there was a question about using a 3-lane reversible middle lane section instead of a 4-lane divided roadway. And that was something that we did study because it obviously has some very attractive elements to it. And from a road capacity standpoint, it does a fine job. You have 2 lanes in the peak direction and 1 lane in the non-peak direction. However, in referring to a number of our sources and experience throughout North America, it was determined that this area was not suitable. There were too many driveways, there were too many accesses, and the adjacent land use and the length of the corridor makes it unsuitable for consideration of a reversible lane. So I'm going to give it back to Patrick to continue on.
De toute façon, c'est évident qu'après la présentation, on pourra continuer la discussion ensemble. La méthode d'évaluation a été la même qui a été faite pour l'évaluation du train léger. Et on a utilisé la même approche qui est celle de la méthode de la concordance. Pourquoi? Parce que c'est une méthode qui est intéressante quand on a surtout à peu près 3 ou 4 options, des choix à faire. On peut leur associer des critères d'évaluation et voir la performance de chacun de ces critères par rapport à chacun des éléments des options. Donc, ça nous a permis de la même façon de pouvoir examiner les points forts, par exemple, de l'option 1, qui est celui-là du réseau routier le long de la rivière, par rapport à son impact sur l'agriculture ou par rapport à son impact sur le milieu social. Alors, ça, c'était une approche qui était vraiment bien adaptée pour l'exercice qu'on voulait faire et qui permettait aussi l'analyse de sensibilité qui a été faite pour le corridor du train léger. Alors, on peut continuer. Alors, les critères d'évaluation étaient différents dans le cas de l'examen du corridor routier qu'il était dans le cas de l'examen du corridor du train léger. Premièrement, parce que c'était dans un milieu différent. Alors, par exemple, il y a tout un aspect de critères sur l'environnement social qui est aussi très important, la répercussion sur le milieu, parce que dans le cas du train léger, il n'y a pas beaucoup de résidences qui sont collées sur l'autoroute ou sur le corridor de l'autoroute, alors que dans notre cas, c'est beaucoup plus important. Répercussions sur les projets d'aménagement, donc ce dont on parlait il y a quelques minutes sur les projections de développement dans tout le corridor et dans la région ici. Je ne vais pas tous les passer en détail, mais il y avait par exemple l'aspect des répercussions sur les ressources agricoles qui était très important parce que plusieurs des corridors traversent des milieux agricoles où il n'y a pas un réseau routier établi. Donc, ce critère-là en particulier avait aussi des sous-critères qui traitaient par exemple du morcellement du milieu agricole. Quand vous avez des terres, vous savez que moins elles sont morcelées, mieux c'est. Un réseau routier fait ça, puis ça n'arrange pas. La qualité des sols à certains endroits, et ainsi de suite. Donc, il y avait 68 critères qui ont été utilisés pour cette analyse-ci. Un plus grand nombre de critères que dans le cas du train léger, dans le cas du corridor de train léger. Les mêmes critères étaient à peu près utilisés. Oui, monsieur? Oui, dans les critères d'évaluation, il y en a un qui est sur les aspects sécuritaires. Where's the safety issue treated in which one? Dans le transport, il y a sécurité. Ces aspects de la fluidité de la circulation en cas d'accident est toujours pris en compte. Donc, c'est le même cas sur n'importe quel réseau routier. Là, ce serait exactement les mêmes mesures d'atténuation qui seraient utilisées. Un des commentaires, c'est qu'il n'y a pas de route alternative. One of the comments is that there's no alternative road in this particular corridor.
Well, if you use number 2 or number 3 and keep 17 2 lanes, you have alternatives.
Donc, le commentaire qui vient d'être fait, c'est qu'effectivement, si on utilise l'option 2 ou 3, ça permet d'avoir deux corridors routiers qui sont séparés. C'est ça? Donc, je vais quand même continuer. On pourra continuer la conversation. La pondération, c'est assez intéressant parce que si vous prenez le petit document qui vous a été remis à la porte, vous verrez aussi que la pondération est assez différente. Ou par exemple, dans le poids de l'aspect transport, pour ce qui est de notre étude de cette section-là, est de 35 %, alors que dans l'autre étude, il était de 40 %. Un autre point intéressant, c'est que l'aspect social est de 29 % dans le cadre de l'étude du corridor routier. Il était juste de 19 % dans le cas précédent. Alors, c'est pour vous donner un exemple comment la méthode peut bien s'adapter au milieu réel que les corridors vont traverser. Donc, c'était clair ici que les gens de Prescott Russell, les gens de la Ville d'Ottawa et les experts conseils se sont réunis et ont décidé des critères et donné des poids qui étaient plus appropriés pour cette région-ci par rapport à un autre endroit. Alors, le résultat de l'évaluation a été même approche que dans le cas précédent. Les chiffres que vous voyez individuellement sont un chiffre qui résume de façon globale la performance de chacune des options par rapport à l'autre. Alors, il y a beaucoup de calculs qui ont été faits et les informations détaillées sont sur la table, donc disponibles si vous êtes enclin aux mathématiques et puis à faire ce genre d'exercice. Mais ce qui est important de voir ici, c'est qu'effectivement, l'option d'élargissement de la route 174 et du chemin comté 17 arrive en première place dans l'évaluation qui a été faite. Chacune des autres options, l'option 3A, c'est-à-dire celle effectivement de la prolongation de Ennis, arrive en deuxième place avec l'option 2 qui passe à travers des terrains agricoles en grande quantité, traverse ces terrains-là, demande beaucoup de construction, passe à travers des zones humides, des sentiers, etc. Évidemment, un impact beaucoup plus grand aussi sur l'expropriation, entre autres.
Pouvez-vous me répéter, s'il vous plaît, c'est qui a participé?
Okay, the question that is asked, and I'll give the microphone to Valerie. Who participated in developing the criteria? Because some
saying that the first number one is your best option. I'd like to know that.
and who contributed to identify number one as the yeah.
The last slides showed some details about the numbers, and here, this shows you how various, the sensitivity analysis. So you'll see the first one was the weights provided by the two proponents, which is the City of Ottawa and the United Counties of Prescott and Russell. Then there are the weights just from Prescott and Russell, just from Ottawa, just from the consultants, and then all of us together. And then as was for the other study, we then looked at how sensitive it was to change. So we took away a whole factor or criteria groups, like the social, the transport. So we did 17 tests to see how sensitive this would. What did we have to change to get a different answer? And you can see partly on this screen, but all 17 are not up here. The alternative one, the widening of 174.17, was preferred in 11 out of the 17. So some of the other ones, as you can see here, that there was the option, the Innis baseline option was preferred under some circumstances.
I guess the point I'm trying to make is that
consultation such as we're doing tonight is important for the confirmation or
I was at the Cumberland consultation that
we do appreciate people coming to us and telling them what they feel. And as I mean, I know this is difficult, but this is the most important time for us to get your input. We have gone through with the various specialists on the study team, looking at what the criteria should be, what helps differentiate the alternatives, and we have gone through a very careful ranking and weighting process so that you could see what changes would have to be made to get a different answer. And you can see it right here. And so if you want to comment on what you think is an appropriate weight or other items that in our analysis, we would be very pleased to hear your opinion.
G53. N40. N40.
Bingo!
Comment ça, bingo?
Le TV Bingo, en direct du studio TVC22, tous les dimanches 19h15 sur TVC22 ou sur Internet au www.tvc22.ca.
Generally, the residential landowners are considered under the social environment. So we consider area of property and disruption during construction and other indicators as in the big list in the evaluation report. So if you would like to have a look at that in more detail, if you have any comments, we'd be glad to. The widening of 174.17 is the most expensive, and it was ranked lowest on that criteria. I cannot recall exactly on that new route. It is a very difficult route to build because of the escarpment, so. But I can't tell you that tonight. If you want to ask that question, or it actually will be in the evaluation report that's sitting over on the table. We can look later if you'd like.
Valerie.
Yes, sir.
I didn't hear quite everything you said, but you're saying about the traffic light at Trim stopping the traffic and backing things up, and on Innis it's the same. Not just at Trim, but I just wanted to clarify, at Trim, as part of the project, we are going to turn that into an interchange and take that traffic light away. So it does help at that end of portion. Yeah, so we're only talking at Trim, but that does solve one part of the problem.
We would appreciate if you would submit a comment so we can talk to you in more detail, maybe afterwards, about exactly, because it's hard when we're not actually standing at a board to understand all the detail that you're asking right now. The downstream effects were taken into consideration. We even did travel time studies from Rockland right to the split to assess the existing conditions, and then we used the travel demand forecasting model to give us an idea of what future conditions will be like, and that includes Innis Road, Trim Road, and yes, Trim Road would need to be widened to get people down to the freeway.
Je vous remercie du commentaire. Je pense que Samantha vient de prendre ça en note là, pour la prochaine réunion. Et puis, ce qu'on pourra peut-être faire tout à l'heure, alors quand on continuera les discussions, s'il y a d'autres questions, c'est que si les gens veulent bien venir, on pourra leur passer le microphone, au moins en attendant. Donc, effectivement, l'option privilégiée provisoire, celle qui, à l'heure actuelle, compte tenu de l'évaluation environnementale qui a été faite selon la méthodologie que vous avez vue, privilégie l'élargissement de la route 174, ça dit autoroute ici, là, mais ça ne devrait pas, là, de la route 174 et du comté, de la route de comté 17. La raison pour ça, c'est que la solution, cette option-là, c'est celle qui répond le mieux aux besoins en transport proprement dit. Vous avez vu qu'il y avait un aspect qui était uniquement transport. Dans l'évaluation, même quand vous enleviez l'aspect transport, elle dominait encore parce qu'elle avait d'autres avantages. Ça, c'est dans l'évaluation de sensibilité. C'est une option qui tient compte du flux de circulation, c'est-à-dire qu'elle favorise la circulation dans les 2 heures des 2 heures de pointe et aussi des origines et des destinations, alors que les autres options ne sont pas aussi bien connectées autant au point de départ qu'au point d'arrivée des populations et aux heures qui sont utilisées. Elle offre une meilleure liaison au réseau routier et au transport en commun. Tout à l'heure, je mentionnais que le transport en commun pouvait bénéficier d'aménagements faits au réseau routier. Quand vous avez 2 voies dans chaque direction, ça permet aussi, soit en tout temps, soit à des heures, soit d'une façon contrôlée, de pouvoir permettre aux autobus et aux véhicules à haute occupation de pouvoir utiliser certaines voies de façon prioritaire. Donc, des avantages aussi pour le transport collectif qui sont possibles dans ce corridor-là en particulier parce qu'il y a 4 voies. Elle ouvre des possibilités d'amélioration aussi pour les cyclistes. Je ne dirais pas les piétons parce que je ne pense pas qu'il y en ait beaucoup qui marchent mais le long de la route. Mais à certains endroits, il peut y avoir des aménagements, comme on le verra sur une des coupes, pour les piétons et pour les cyclistes. Mais le reste du chemin peut être aménagé pour les cyclistes en particulier à certains endroits et selon les besoins. C'est une option qui appuie les conceptions prévues là, environnementales, qui a le moins d'impact possible sur les ruisseaux, sur la traversée des éléments physiques, biophysiques existants, alors que quand on construit des chemins ou des routes dans des milieux où il n'y a pas encore de corridor, ça a des impacts plus importants. Vous dites qu'il n'y a pas de corridor, l'extension des Road. C'est ça que non, ce que j'ai dit, c'est qu'il y avait des 2 options. Oui, mais il y a une portion dans cette option-là où il faut construire un nouveau réseau routier. Entre Dunning et Dana, c'est ça. Et puis aussi, c'est une option qui évite soit de déranger, soit d'impliquer la construction d'infrastructures, d'aqueducs, d'égouts ou de drainage importants. Alors, dans la plupart, ça c'est un résumé vraiment des avantages qui sont sortis de l'évaluation environnementale, mais c'est une des raisons pour laquelle, même quand on fait les analyses de sensibilité, l'option arrive en première place dans 11 cas sur les 17 tests qui ont été faits. Alors simplement pour vous donner ici une idée d'une coupe d'une rue, d'une traverse en milieu rural, l'emprise serait composée donc de 2 voies de part et d'autre, un chemin qui serait tracé à partir de part et d'autre, sauf dans les cas où il y aurait des contraintes d'un côté de la route. Probablement à certains endroits, l'implantation d'une barrière centrale, en particulier pour améliorer la sécurité. Comme on l'a dit précédemment, des accotements asphaltés qui peuvent être utilisés à certains endroits par les piétons ou les cyclistes, et aussi des intersections et des mesures de traffic calming ou d'atténuation de la circulation qui pourraient être implantées à certains endroits. Ça, c'est vraiment une coupe là, qui est prise quelque part au milieu du corridor. Et des aménagements, c'est sûr que j'ai entendu à plusieurs commentaires qui concernent la barrière centrale, mais c'est bien certain qu'il y aurait des aménagements pour permettre des accès de virage à gauche et aux entrées des résidences existantes. Une autre coupe qui a été proposée, celle-là plus en milieu urbain, où comme vous le voyez, c'est une chose de pouvoir faire du vélo dans un accotement qui est asphalté, mais c'est quand même plus confortable de pouvoir faire ça dans un milieu où les cyclistes et les piétons peuvent être séparés du réseau routier. Ça, ce serait le genre de coupe ou d'installation qui pourrait être installé, qui donnerait un meilleur accès, par exemple, à la rivière, qui aurait de l'éclairage qui ne serait pas nécessairement dans le cas du corridor en milieu plus rural. Et aussi, à cause de la localisation de la cité Clarence-Rockland, qui pourrait aussi être une porte d'entrée à la région de la capitale nationale. Alors ça, c'est simplement des exemples qui ont été mis pour montrer les aménagements qui peuvent être faits, de séparer les piétons et les cyclistes du réseau routier, de faire des aménagements autant esthétiques que pratiques et sécuritaires qui peuvent être faits dans différents milieux ruraux ou plus urbains, telles que les techniques là, qui sont suggérées sur la diapositive suivante. Par exemple, de carrefour giratoire. Carrefour giratoire ont l'avantage qu'il n'y a jamais d'accident grave dans un carrefour giratoire. Ce n'est pas aimé par tout le monde. Je sais qu'il y a une réticence, surtout quand il y a une double voie. Ce n'est pas facile à s'habituer, mais au moins c'est une technique de gestion de la circulation qui est extrêmement efficace parce qu'il n'y a jamais plus qu'un accident de bumper dans des carrefours giratoires. Il n'y a jamais d'accident mortel ou grave, en fait, statistiquement. Il y a toujours dans les mesures de mitigation des améliorations des habitats fauniques, des milieux humides et biophysiques. C'est aussi une possibilité de modernisation des ponceaux existants qui sont présentement sous les routes et aussi de la structure et des infrastructures existantes. Ça permet le maintien de la circulation et des opérations de transport en commun, comme je mentionnais plus tôt. Et puis aussi, ça permet l'aménagement de sentiers polyvalents favorables là, aux piétons et aux cyclistes. Alors donc, en termes, à titre de conclusion, les prochaines étapes, almost feel like letting you just to finish. De toute évidence, Valérie est la chargée de projet et l'ingénieur en chef du projet. Alors, c'est elle qui a les réponses aux questions.
Merci. So the next thing we do, we have to take the input we have from today and from yesterday and the day before. We've been out every night this week listening and hearing what people think. And that's when we will then confirm what the preferred alternatives should be for both studies. Then we're going to go away and do our more details on this design. In the area of the light rail, we'll look at where the transit stations might be and what the design can be for those stations. We will look at the interchange at Trim Road and at Montreal Road. We'll look at intersections. Where can we put in those roundabouts and where are signals necessary? And then we will look at, in consultation with local people in Clarence Rockland, we'll say what should the road cross-section look like? Should there be sidewalks or should there be multi-use pathways like we've shown on some of our sections? And where can we put in pedestrian and cyclist connections? So after we've done all this and we've incorporated our mitigation measures for any impacts, then we'll come back to you in the spring and show you what we've come up with and ask you for your help again in refining and making what we have better. Then later this year, we expect to present our results to councils and committees of Prescott Russell and the City of Ottawa. And then there'll be finally a public review of the study documentation. So you will see, if you ask to be put on our mailing list, we will provide you with an email or other notification that the study is available for your review so you don't miss it. And then if you have any concerns at that time, we'd appreciate, again, hearing from you. So it's quiet here now.
Is this PowerPoint on the Ottawa website?
It is not at this time, but it would be our intention to get this PowerPoint up, Angela? The display boards, we're almost there.
What is the time frame for the actual implementation of this widening?
Well, Angela was mentioning that it's right now it is not in the affordable plan. So we keep talking about if there's a pot of gold somewhere that is found, then it may be moved up. But right now we can't tell you when that might happen.
Is there a detailed breakdown somewhere of the financial costs for these different options? Like you're saying in your presentation that economic cost is only 60% of the total picture as to choosing which route or...
In that one option, that was all it had. In that we did 17 different weights.
Yeah.
So
I was interested in looking at when you're coming up with your capital costs, what makes up the capital costs, and just taking a look at a budget that was used to come up with your economic forecast.
Certainly at this stage, we do a preliminary functional level of analysis, and so we have more, more contingency built in because there are more unknowns, and then as the design is refined more and more, the estimate becomes more and more refined and more detailed.
So if we do extend the Innis, do the alternative 3A, the Innis baseline extension, we are going to need to widen Innis in Orleans and downstream. So we already know that because it's already congested today. I am actually a resident of Orleans. I commute into downtown with my husband and my son, so we're 3 in the car. And we leave at 7 o'clock, we take Innis Road, we go up Jeanne d'Arc and take the 174. So I know exactly what the traffic is like. So if you leave early, you'll get to downtown at a good time, and if you leave later during the rush hour, then you're stuck in traffic. I mean, traffic is just, it's a part of our daily lives. And you keep widening roads downstream into downtown, they are not getting widened. So at some point in time, people are going to have to shift their behavior. That's why the city is building light rail. The city has decided that the priority is other sustainable modes, and we are extending light rail into Orleans, into the west, into the south, because the city of Ottawa cannot afford to keep building roads, because it promotes more vehicle users. We're protecting for the widening of the 174, and when we get funding to widen it, then we will widen it at that time. But the city has decided to invest in other modes of transportation. So we are building a huge pedestrian and cycling network in addition to transit. And when we did this study, we decided we're going to protect for HOV, so that when we widen the 174 that goes all the way to Rockland, those Clarence Rockland Transit will actually be able to have transit priority. And that will get them into Ottawa, where we will have light rail.
I tell you, when I leave at 7 o'clock on my 4-lane, I'm driving like a madman. I'm going to get to Jeanne d'Arc, I'm going to go unstuck. I'm not going in town quicker than I was. It's just a million. I just got quicker to Jeanne d'Arc instead of what we're saying. If you look through, I've been through baseline quite a few times. I made it quicker into town, alternative route, because there was a big accident. I made it a lot quicker into town than doing a 4-lane.
So if we do extend the Innis, do the alternative 3A, the Innis baseline extension, we are going to need to widen Innis in Orleans and downstream. So we already know that because it's already congested today. I am actually a resident of Orleans. I commute into downtown with my husband and my son, so we're 3 in the car. And we leave at 7 o'clock, we take Innis Road, we go up Jeanne d'Arc and take the 174. So I know exactly what the traffic is like. So if you leave early, you'll get to downtown at a good time, and if you leave later during the rush hour, then you're stuck in traffic. I mean, traffic is it's a part of our daily lives. And you keep widening roads downstream into downtown, they are not getting widened. So at some point in time, people are going to have to shift their behavior. That's why the city is building light rail. The city has decided that the priority is other sustainable modes, and we are extending light rail into Orleans, into the west, into the south, because the city of Ottawa cannot afford to keep building roads, because it promotes more vehicle users. We're protecting for the widening of the 174, and when we get funding to widen it, then we will widen it at that time. But the city has decided to invest in other modes of transportation. So we are building a huge pedestrian and cycling network in addition to transit. And when we did this study, we decided we're going to protect for HOV, so that when we widen the 174, that goes all the way to Rockland, those Clarence Rockland Transit will actually be able to have transit priority. And that will get them into Ottawa, where we will have light rail. Hi, Jean-Marc.
Are you planning to have some service road in some area, like the original plan? Because this road line was supposed to be built in early 90s. The plans were made, the environmental assessment was completed. They took the money away from here, they built the 416 with it. So we know that in 1992. But there were some service roads, like at Kidsilla. They were changing the entrance. Along Chatelaine Village, there was a service road. There was another one near Edgewater at the time. Is that in the plan for now?
Yes, we will be consolidating driveways to the extent possible. The City of Ottawa did have a safety study that was done in 2011, I believe, and one of the recommendations out of there was to consolidate driveways as much as possible. Obviously, it depends on the right-of-way that we have. In many areas, we have quite wide right-of-way, but right through the village core, it's quite narrow. So we don't have a lot of right-of-way to be able to do that, but we will be using techniques like speed management so that it will be a safer environment.
Is the funding that we talked about, I guess it was 4 or 5 years ago, I think it was 100 million, Mr. Leon, is that still available from the federal and the provincial levels?
It's 40 million from the Fed and 40 million from the province.
Is it
It's
still
still in the trust presently. Kelly was here. Both of them, that was given for the project in 2006.
And it's still available or not?
Yeah, it's still available.
Okay, good.
The cost at the time was $123 million, but today you could say it's going to be closer to 300, 350.
So the lighting of the 174, is that a provincial funding or is that an Ottawa funding?
Now it's the municipalities have accepted the offer made by by a government. And I was completely against. I fought against it, and they told me to get out of it because they were getting money in return. But now it's a municipality. The 174 belongs to the city of Ottawa. They got 3.2 million, I believe, and United County, Russell, got close to around 3.8. So the money is there now. Both government has offered each one of them 40 million to help building the road. And I still say, after listening tonight, what happened with the 416 when they took the money from here, because the government got pressure. So we got to start putting pressure on the government to get more money to build it or to take it over.
Alors que je sais que au projet, vous êtes trop le garder pour 20 ans en avant. Et quand on dépense ce genre d'argent-là, il faudrait voir un petit peu plus loin que le bout de son nez. L'option bleue, là, elle va passer à travers les terrains qui sont vacants et qui ne dérangent pas personne à ce point-ci. Il va falloir faire des ajustements, c'est sûr, pour les propriétés et ces choses-là. Mais le potentiel est là, de prendre un droit de passage, là. Faites-les, je ne sais pas, 200 pieds, 300 pieds, puis qu'on puisse un jour, parce qu'au bout de la ligne, là, on le connecte avec un chemin à 6 lignes sur le 174. Un jour, là, dans 50 ans, dans 100 ans, ça va venir. Puis on va être là avec le même problème, le même niaisage. Fait que là, c'est le temps de réserver, puis voir en avant.
Pas de questions?
Non, c'est un commentaire.
OK, c'est bon.
Et un maudit bon.
Mesdames et messieurs, j'espère que cette session d'information vous plaît jusqu'à présent. Vers la fin de la soirée, il y a eu des questions. Plus de questions qu'il en était passé pendant la soirée. Et il y en a deux que j'ai retenues pour vous, car je les trouvais très, très informatives. Elles ont été posées par Isabelle Vachon de Rockland et M. David Hopper, un des consultants, est celui qui a répondu à ces questions et je vous suggère, conseille de les écouter attentivement. Bonne écoute.
Qu'est-ce qui coûte le plus cher ou le moins cher? Construire un chemin de fer ou bien construire un chemin
Quelle option est plus chère?
Qu'est-ce qui coûte le moins cher, le plus cher? De toute façon, ça va répondre à ma question.
OK. Une route ou un train?
Oui. À long terme.
Je vais parler longuement ce que j'ai là.
Non, quelqu'un qui connaît une...
Question was, what's the most expensive, road or train? I'll ask this guy, he's the expert. Here's the train. Sorry, David.
Well, when we look at cities, if you look from the inside out, the core of the city, where we have density, we have people who are making short trips because they can walk for a lot of times, but they need to go a little bit further. We have the density of people who want to travel by public transport. We have enough people to pay for the system to operate. That's why we have a big subway in Montreal and a big subway in Toronto, and a smaller system in Vancouver and Calgary and Edmonton, and one coming in Ottawa, and we have a bus that runs 3 times a day in Rockland. It's not necessarily the cost of building it, it's the cost of operating it. So if you have to have one driver driving a bus out here to pick up one person, that's a taxi. If we have one driver who comes out here and picks up 40 people, that's pretty good. If he can pick up 40 people every 15 minutes, that's even better. If he can pick up 40 people every 3 minutes, that's when it starts to make sense to build rail. You don't start building rail until you have in the order of 8,000 to 10,000 people per hour who want to do that for 3 hours in the morning and 3 hours in the afternoon, and a lot of people who want to do it in the middle of the day. So you're not going to get light rail any further east than Trim for, I would suggest, at least a generation, if not 2 generations. What Ottawa did back in the 1970s is they said, we want to make Ottawa a transit city. And the number of trips per capita that people in Ottawa take on public transit is the highest of any city its size in North America. It's over 200 trips per capita. That compares with Montreal at around 320, and Toronto is around 400 trips per person on public transport. What Ottawa did back in the 70s was they said, let's put in a system, and we're not going to solve the downtown problem. We'll run on-street downtown because it's too expensive to fix that problem right away. But when we get out into the suburban areas, we'll put in dedicated roadways so that people can have a really quick trip from the outside edge of town into town or close to town. They can get really quickly from Place d'Orleans to campus, and then, well, if you're going all the way across downtown, sometimes you can walk faster than the bus. And the idea was that would build the ridership. You could have buses from all parts of Orleans and all parts of Canada feeding in and using this one lane to go downtown. We're now at the point where we have about 10,000 people per hour that go on Albert and Slater in each direction. In 1976, they said there's 3 conditions to build rail and to go underground in downtown Ottawa. The population has to be at least 1 million. 1 million people in a city is when you get to the point where you need to take your transit off the surface and separate it. The second condition would be that we're around 10,000 people per hour. And the third was the population employment pattern was going to change significantly, and it would happen around the year 2000. So we're a little bit late getting it done, but we're now moving in that direction. The section from Blair to Tunney's Pasture, which is 13 kilometers, is going to cost $2.1 billion just to build. Then it has to be operated. Part of the benefit is that we're going to have 17 trains that run in the morning and the afternoon rush hour. So we're going to have 17 people driving trains instead of what we have today, which is 280 people driving buses. That's where it starts to make sense, because there's enough people to fill up 300 people on a train every couple of minutes. What's going to happen, I suggest, as rail comes further east and further west and further south, is that the transit way is going to extend further. So we're going to have shoulder lanes on a widened, we're going to either convert one of the lanes on this widened 174, or widen the shoulders to allow buses to get around congestion, and make that the priority. So give buses priority so that they can circulate through Rockland and then get in on the highway. They can circulate through Cumberland Village. They can come up from the south and get to a dedicated corridor that gets them to the rail, that gets people to downtown fast. So really, the rail is very, very expensive, both to build and to operate. And I think really out here, we need to be planning how do we make buses more effective and a higher priority in the network. And I think the only way you could do that is by having one corridor that has multiple lanes. If you have a 2-lane road here and a 2-lane road here, where do you put the bus? You're putting the bus in congestion here, or you're putting the bus in congestion there. If you have multiple lanes together, and you have a barrier down the middle, the road automatically becomes safer by separating the 2 directions of travel. If you have 2 lanes of roadway, and you're driving along and somebody is driving slow because they want to slow down and turn into the gas station or off onto a side street, you go into the other lane and you go around them. That's the benefit of 2 lanes, is you have more flexibility to move around other slower moving vehicles, or if you're going fast, or the other. So there are more opportunities on a 4-lane road to improve the overall traffic flow, even with some traffic lights. Too many traffic lights is bad, not enough is bad. There's always a balance in the middle. But we could put more bus traffic on there as well and start moving more people and using that road more effectively. And as I said in my presentation, right now, the Cumberland Transit Bus, CRT, it has to go all the way into downtown and come all the way back out. So he picks up people in the morning all the way out here. And has a nice full bus by the time he gets to the city of Ottawa boundary. And he uses that beautiful transitway all the way downtown. But there's nobody coming back out in the morning. So he has to run empty for half the time. If he could only go as far as Blair and eventually only as far as Trim and turn around, he could do twice as many trips. So now that same bus driver is spending 4 hours on the road and he's making 4 trips, not 2 trips. So now it's half as expensive to operate that bus. So that's what we're trying to do with the network, is it has to grow from the inside out. And so cities change over time. What happens is cities reach about 4 different stages of growth, and Ottawa is sort of at that 3rd stage, where you're at 1 million people, and you can no longer have a bus from everywhere to downtown. You're going to have a rail system that is the line haul that reaches so far out, and then you have a whole bunch of bus routes that spread out from the end of it. And that's the way the city is now trying to move. But it's a real, when we did this work in 2008, it took us a good year and a half to convince even the people who live in downtown Ottawa that the buses should come off the street off Alberta Slater. So it's not an easy argument anywhere in Ottawa. But what I'm suggesting is that if we can find a way to create a corridor here that is going to allow for more frequent bus travel as well as more car travel, that's going to be our best option for the medium to long term.
Thank you very much. Very good.
So the growth of Rockland hasn't been growing like the other villages and towns all around Ottawa.
Mm-hmm.
So Rockland is an anomaly. We shouldn't have been growing.
And that's another thing that the city
We should have been growing more southerly. Maybe.
Yeah, maybe. Or what the governments in the area have asked the province to do is to come in and say, we need to do an exercise in Eastern Ontario the same way we did in the Greater Toronto area, which says we have this Oak Ridges moraine we want to protect. So we actually have to decide collectively as everyone in the Greater Toronto area where people should be allowed to live in the future and where they shouldn't be allowed to live. So we now have what's called the places to grow. So there are actually limitations that say there are whole areas north of Toronto where you're not allowed to sever a farm, you're not allowed to build another house at all, even though it's urban all around you. And that's what they want to do in Ottawa and say, okay, should we allow more development to happen out here along this corridor? Is this the best place for it? Or should we say, no, let's stop it here because we've reached the capacity of what our network can handle. And we don't want to give up. One of the options that keeps coming up is this diagonal line. So one of the things it crosses through is grade A agricultural land, which we are losing at an alarming rate. So we're going to go, and we build this blue route. Yeah, it's a nice direct route into downtown. It severs a whole bunch of farms, which now makes them less productive. It takes a portion of that Class A agricultural land out of service forever. And we're learning that in cities that we have to turn that around. So I would suggest that if you're not going to go along the river and you really think 2 and 2 is the way to go, it's got to be further south. This is a balance that the province has decided to strike, that in other parts of Ontario, in Northern Ontario, and in the Greater Toronto Area, grade A agricultural land is valued much more highly than residential development.
Yes, we have to know and to remember that agricultural land in Canada represents only a wee little percentage of the whole surface of Canada.
Yes.
So if we want to feed ourselves, we have to nurture that.
Absolutely.
We cannot build road everywhere.
And that's one of the reasons, when you look at the criteria, why the blue route doesn't perform very well.
Yes.
Because it is putting, the other thing that will happen, and the thing that the NCC pushes in terms of more crossings of the Greenbelt, is the more you break this up and the more you provide access, growth,
to take a medical analogy, what actually starts to happen is our growth becomes like a cancer. If you open this route along here, what's the first thing that's going to happen? All those severed farms are going to be bought out by developers who want to put 40 houses on each farm.
Yeah, but you guys already have some of the time with agricultural land, so that's what we stand. Don't tell me this.
Well, the urban boundary of Ottawa has now been set. There is an urban boundary that is set, and development cannot happen outside that boundary for a very long time. There's, what, 25 to 30 years worth of growth protected in Ottawa within those urbanized areas. And the intention is to control that. The city is also looking, if you look at the number of housing starts, we're seeing a huge rise in the number of apartment starts and a reduction in single family.
That portion of the Blue Road is part of the rock shield. And it's worse agricultural land than what you guys have done behind Orleans. That one behind there was the best thing for Ottawa. That's where they got most of their vegetables. That one that you have, that place, that's the rock shield. There's not good land right there. There's some small stuff, but that's it.
The reason I ask about the railroad is that what has been asked earlier about the old railroad that we see in Bourget and so on. The base is already there. But of course it belongs to the area. But negotiation happens.
There is actually work being done in the background. There was a study done about 7 or 8 years ago under Mayor O'Brien with a team that looked at should Ottawa be protecting in the longer term for a regional rail network like GO Transit operates in Southern Ontario and like the AMT in the Montreal area. And there is an active program to try and find ways to consolidate and maintain those corridors under either railway ownership or public ownership so that they're not lost. Because some of them have been given up, unfortunately. What we're finding though is that the railways are very, very jealously guard their property. They do not want to give it up. They have been caught before where they now cannot expand to meet the demand that they have. So they are not going to give up their corridors easily, and they want to be the one to run this regional rail system. So it's unlikely that they're going to sell that corridor, but I'm sure they're looking at it in the context that in 20 or 30 years, if more development happens out this way, that's the time for commuter rail to come in and for those tracks to be reactivated.
So do I understand that Via Rail could develop if they have the money?
If Via Rail owns the land and it's still designated as a rail corridor, they can start tomorrow putting tracks back in there if they think there's an economic case for it.
Your railway system action.
No, it won't. No, and that's the other. I mean, the other problem with where the historic rail corridors are is that our cities have changed, and what we developed around our rail corridors was usually industrial.
Yes, yes. I do not have all the little information, but the basic drawing is there.
Yeah, and the idea would be that eventually there'll be a commuter rail network that overlays the rapid transit network. Much like in Toronto, you have the streetcars on a small grid downtown, then you have the subway on the next scale, and then you have GO Transit on the scale after that. It's the same as you have local streets, then main streets, then highways, then superhighways. You do the same thing with transit. You have buses, then you have transit ways, then you have LRTs, then you have subways, then you have commuter rail. So we're trying to protect that hierarchy. Unfortunately, in Ottawa, one of the biggest things that I saw was in the 1960s, they gave up the train station downtown and moved it out to the middle of nowhere. So you can connect all the railways in, but it connects to where nobody wants to go. So the challenge is going to be, how do you actually connect to where people want to go? And that's going to be the challenge that they're trying to address for the next generation.
But now we know we cannot do that, and they did the same with the airport and Montreal. So we have to keep those transportation systems in view.
Well, I think we've kind of running out of steam. I know I'm running out of steam. We can stay around for a few more minutes if people want to talk individually. Stress the importance. Please do submit your comments. They do make a difference. We do pay attention to what's in here.
This report has to be approved by the politicians that you elected to represent you. So there is feedback that is important to this. There are things that you know about these areas that we don't, that we need to know. So please fill out the comment forms. They are taken very seriously by the study team. So I would like to thank you for coming out and spending the time it's taken tonight to review these issues. And I'd like to thank you personally for doing that. And as Valerie mentioned, this is actually one of the rewarding parts of our job, is to actually get out and engage and help people understand what's happening and understand what they need and try to tie it together. So thank you very much. And we can meet around the boards if people would like to have some one-on-one discussion. Thank you very much for coming.
Merci d'être demeurés avec nous, mesdames et messieurs, pour toute cette soirée. Et même si M. Hopper vient de nous dire que c'est fini, ce n'est pas fini. J'ai eu l'opportunité à la toute fin de parler avec 3 personnes qui ont travaillé très fort. D'ailleurs, les 2 chargés de projet, la première de la Ville d'Ottawa, le second des Comtés unis de Prescott-Russell, et finalement, celui que j'ai décidé de baptiser pour l'événement, le père de l'expansion de la route 17. Donc, je ne vous reviendrai pas à la fin de la soirée. Je vous dis merci d'avoir été là avec nous et je vous dis passez une agréable semaine. J'ai avec moi, mesdames et messieurs, une dame que vous avez probablement reconnue, Angela Taylor. Angela est chef de projet pour la Ville d'Ottawa. En plus d'être ingénieure, donc elle est vraiment impliquée dans ce projet-là depuis le début. Et Angela, do you see the light at the end of the tunnel for the 174-17? Do you ever see this project really completed?
Well, it'll actually have to be completed because the City of Ottawa is expecting a report to Committee and Council before the end of 2015. So the plan is to go to Committee and Council in December of 2015, and it may actually be even earlier. So, so we are seeing the end. Yes.
You're seeing the light at the end of the tunnel.
We are.
So it will be good for everyone because, as we all know, projects are being built further east. There's 4,000 or 5,000 homes where they're building roads right now east of Trim.
Yes, if you're talking about the Cardinal Creek Village, that's correct. That plan has been in the works for about 2, almost even 3 years. So they went ahead, the developer went ahead as a result of the urban expansion that was approved by the city. I think they've been anxious to develop that for a long time. So with that development happening, actually, you know, it'll be good to promote first of all our light rail that's going in the east, and then if there is a widening on the 174, then it will actually support it as well. So good connections, good transit linkages, good transportation. And the other thing we're doing with the widening of the 174 is we'll be looking at pedestrian and cycling linkages as well. So that will help with a community there.
That will help as well. And if they can get more jobs in that portion of Ottawa, that will help easing of transportation as well.
Well, absolutely. And actually, there's nothing better than to put transit on a corridor, because that will definitely promote, you know, transit-oriented development. So not only increase residential, but also commercial development as well. So, you know, hopefully that will provide the opportunities once we do have transit.
Well, good. Well, thank you.
Thank you so much.
Congratulations for the good work.
Thank you.
And you'll probably be happy to rest for the next few evenings.
Yes, I will be, and I'm taking part of Friday off and Monday off. So yes, absolutely.
A well-deserved break.
Thank you. It's been a pleasure, Ashley. Like, I really enjoy doing this project with Prescott-Russell. So it's been great.
Merci.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. Merci.
Thank you.
Vous l'avez reconnu, mesdames et messieurs. On pourrait dire le père de l'expansion de la route 17-174, l'ex-député de Glengarry-Prescott-Russell, M. Jean-Marc Lalonde. Bonjour Jean-Marc.
Bonjour Jacques.
Après cette réunion à soir, est-ce que tu la vois, toi, la lumière au bout du tunnel?
Définitivement. Et puis de plus en plus, j'y pense à les procédures qu'ils ont faites lorsque le plan avait déjà été préparé en 1989. Et c'est en 92 que le gouvernement du temps a décidé de prendre l'argent qui avait été voté pour l'élargissement de la route à 4 voies pour construire la 416. Et puis, comme j'ai mentionné tout à l'heure, il faut faire quelque chose de semblable, travailler en équipe et puis retourner voir les officiels du gouvernement, du ministère des Transports, afin qu'ils comprennent que Rutland, 70% de la force ouvrière travaille à Ottawa. Et puis, on doit avoir la route 17 pour accommoder les personnes qui doivent se rendre à Ottawa. Puis actuellement, on est rendu que ça prend 1h30 jusqu'à 2 heures à se rendre le matin. Surtout lorsqu'il y a une petite neige le matin, tu peux t'attendre jusqu'à 2 heures. Et puis ça affecte beaucoup l'immeuble, les agents d'immeubles, le real estate, excuse l'expression, et aussi nos commerces, parce que les marchands actuellement, ils disent, bien, de plus en plus, les gens font les emplettes à Rutland dans les grosseries. Mais ce que je m'ai aperçu, puis je l'ai questionné, puis j'ai fait les recherches, beaucoup de gens, le jeudi soir ou le vendredi soir, ne veulent pas être pris dans le trafic. Ils vont faire leur grosserie à Ottawa pour descendre un peu plus tard pour ne pas être pris dans le trafic.
Ils en ont eu assez toute la semaine.
Définitivement. Et puis, il faut travailler ensemble afin de faire comprendre au gouvernement l'importance qu'on doit reprendre cette route-là.
D'accord. Tu as mentionné tantôt que le gouvernement fédéral, le gouvernement provincial avaient mis 40 millions de dollars de côté.
C'est ça.
Alors que l'estimé est alentour de 120, 123 millions. Et aujourd'hui, l'estimé est beaucoup, beaucoup plus élevé que ça. Est-ce qu'il va falloir que les gouvernements y contribuent? Sinon, Prescott Russell et la Ville d'Ottawa n'ont peut-être pas les moyens de construire cette route-là.
En 2006, l'estimé de la construction à 4 voies de Trim aller jusqu'au chemin Landry de Clarence Point, les estimés étaient de 123 millions. Et puis aujourd'hui, je dirais que le coût serait dans les environs 300-350 millions pour la même chose. Mais j'étais fier d'apprendre ce soir que la Ville d'Ottawa émet plus de permis de construction. J'avais préparé un projet de loi que la ministre m'avait demandé de présenter, mais ça avait été refusé au comté. Mais la Ville d'Ottawa, j'avais eu plusieurs rencontres avec eux autres, puis aujourd'hui, elle nous annonce qu'ils n'émettent plus de permis de construction. Bien, tu peux avoir un permis de construction, mais ils ne te donneront pas d'entrée.
Non. Je me souviens d'ailleurs quand tu t'es présenté au conseil de la cité Clarence-Rockland, et tu avais fait des petits reproches à l'architecte du blocage.
C'est ça, exactement. Et puis, même, tu peux t'attendre à ça parfois que tu vas avoir des difficultés ou des personnes qui vont essayer de mettre le bois d'un roue, qu'on appelle. Oui. Mais il ne faut pas arrêter, il faut continuer à travailler. Puis de plus en plus, surtout là, je m'aperçois qu'Alfred Plantagenet ont passé une résolution demandant à la province de reprendre la 17. Et puis Fern Dicker, le maire d'Alfred Plantagenet, je viens de le voir il y a quelques minutes, il m'a demandé d'être avec lui lorsqu'on va rencontrer les gens du ministère et le ministre de la voirie à Toronto durant la semaine de Roma à Toronto qui va avoir lieu du 22 au 25.
Mais ça fait plusieurs fois que cette tentative-là se fait. Y a-t-il de l'espoir ou c'est juste une question à l'usure, on va gagner?
Non, j'ai de l'espoir, moi.
J'ai
de l'espoir et puis il faut travailler, comme j'ai dit, il ne faut pas reculer. C'est pour ça, ce soir, c'était la soirée du budget, notre premier soir de budget. Oui. J'étais là au début de la réunion, mais j'ai dit, il est très important que je me rende à la réunion à Rutland.
D'accord. Parce que les gens m'ont demandé, de toute façon, ce soir, Jean-Marc vient ce soir, je dis, il ne peut pas. Tu es arrivé, je suis content de t'avoir arrivé.
Mais c'est très important, encore une fois, là, c'est que les gens de Rutland, ça nous nuit beaucoup dans le développement. Quand je regarde le mois de janvier, nous avons émis seulement un permis de construction pour résidentiel. Un seulement, dans tout le mois de janvier. Ça fait que les gens, ils voyagent depuis l'automne dernier. On est pris dans toutes sortes de problèmes sur la 1774. Et puis, j'ai bien peur. Puis lorsque j'ai fait le porte-en-porte durant la campagne électorale, beaucoup de gens me demandaient qu'est-ce qui va survenir de la 1774. Ça fait qu'il ne faut pas arrêter.
Non, d'accord. Merci beaucoup, Jean-Marc.
Ça fait plaisir.
Puis on va espérer pour le mieux, puis on va attendre la présentation du printemps pour voir où sont les choix finaux.
Mais tu sais, quand ils ont parlé tout à l'heure d'un ring road, excuse l'expression, là, c'est Hervé Mongeon qui s'est levé et qui a posé cette question-là. Oui. Et puis sur le coup, j'ai pensé que c'était bon. Tu as un chemin alternatif pour te rendre à Ottawa. Oui. Parce qu'actuellement, lorsqu'il y a un accident qui survient sur la 174, on est pris le matin. Il n'y a pas d'autre chemin à prendre, à moins que tu te rendes jusqu'à 417, qui est environ 35 km au sud de Rutland. Il y a une personne qui a soulevé ça, qu'on devrait avoir une route qui se rend jusqu'à 417. Oui. Mais hey, c'est ça. Aller-retour, là, tu parles de 65 à 70 km par jour que les personnes doivent parcourir de plus.
Mais ils vont juste prendre les chemins vers l'arrière, puis se rendre à Limoges, ils vont prendre 417.
Oui, c'est ça.
Mais pas besoin de chemin spécial pour ça.
Non, absolument pas.
Parfait. Encore, merci beaucoup encore, Jean-Marc.
Ça fait plaisir, Jacques.
À présent, mesdames et messieurs, je suis avec Marc Clermont, le responsable des travaux publics pour les comtés unis de Prescott-Russell. Et comme vous avez peut-être entendu tantôt, s'il n'y avait pas trop de bruit, quelqu'un qui a travaillé ici dans la cité, pour la ville de Rutland, dans le fond, pendant 50 ans. Bonjour, Marc.
Bonjour, plaisir.
Le chemin, est-ce que tu penses qu'il va se construire avant 2031?
Le projet en tant que tel doit partir de la ville parce qu'on pourrait élargir, mais on va arrêter à Cannon Road. Donc, on a seulement une petite partie. Donc, il faut que ça parte de la ville. La ville, ils ont annoncé que dans le plan maître des routes, c'est pas prévu. La seule raison que ça pourrait avancer le projet, c'est si la province ou le fédéral arrivait avec des subventions. Puis là, la ville reconsidérait certainement la possibilité de regarder à faire les travaux en tant que tel.
Si les comtés unis faisaient le bout au chemin Canal, est-ce que ça pourrait il faudrait qu'il se fasse pour rencontrer les normes de ne pas avoir à refaire l'étude environnementale?
Pourrait. Ça va devenir une décision politique que c'est plus moi, probablement. Moi, je ne recommanderais pas parce qu'on fait juste peut-être frustrer les gens. Rendu à Cannon Road, on ramènerait ça à 2 voies. C'est juste. Mais ça pourrait. Si le conseil me mandatait de le faire, on procéderait avec. Oui.
OK. Cette expérience-là, c'est la Ville d'Ottawa qui l'amène ou c'est les comtés unis? Parce qu'à un moment donné, on nous disait que c'était les comtés qui étaient pour diriger. Puis là, quand j'écoutais les gens parler à soir, je me posais la question, je ne savais plus. Là.
C'est un projet conjoint avec la cité. Évidemment, la subvention est mise au comté. Et puis, c'est moi qui ai plus ou moins convaincu le conseil qu'il faut absolument que la Ville embarque dans cette étude-là. On ne peut pas faire une étude jusqu'au chemin Cannon, par exemple, que ce soit la solution au sud ou la 17. Donc, il faut absolument, parce que le problème, il va plus que juste le chemin Cannon. Donc, on a embarqué la Ville dans le processus. Puis eux, originalement, on parlait jusqu'à Trim, puis eux, dans le processus, puis ils ont embarqué pas le train léger, parce que ça, c'est une étude complètement à part qui est financée 100% par la Ville.
Et de toute façon, la population est pas assez grande pour supporter ça présentement.
La population de Clarence-Rockland ou les comtés, possible si on faisait juste le 2 km qui reste, là, environ, là, tu sais. Possible que ça pourrait se faire. On a fait des petits bouts par le passé. Donc, je dis pas que ça pourrait pas arriver.
Mais ils vont arrêter à Trim.
Oui, c'est ça. Le train léger, oui. C'est ça.
Et selon toi, là, tes trips ils disent quoi comme la route qui va être choisie en choix final?
Bien évidemment, moi, il faut que j'aille avec ce qu'on propose.
Oui.
C'est un processus qui est assez compliqué, rigoureux, compliqué. C'est pas juste dire ce qu'on pense ou... Puis ça dépend à qui tu parles. On n'avait pas tous la même opinion, même à l'interne de l'équipe. Puis on met nos pourcentages, on va avec la moyenne, puis ça sort des chiffres. Évidemment, le processus nous a permis de vérifier si le choix faisait du bon sens. Tu sais, des fois, on fait juste mettre des chiffres dans une matrice, puis on pense que, tu sais, mais après ça, on a fait des analyses voyons, je ne me rappelle plus du terme, mais ce qu'on fait, c'est que tu enlèves un facteur, puis tu redistribues le reste. Ou tu dis, OK, tous les facteurs sont égaux. Ou tu dis, tu enlèves 2 facteurs, tu sais, pour voir quelle option ou alternative va devenir la bonne. Puis dans le processus, on l'a fait ça. On a pratiquement enlevé chaque facteur, puis même enlevé l'opinion des gens de la ville dans, tu sais. Puis l'option 1, ou l'alternative 1, qui est l'élargissement de la 17, sortait 11 fois sur 17. Donc, ça démontre que l'analyse a été rigoureusement évaluée. Là, c'est certain que tu enlèves certains facteurs. Un exemple, ils ont mentionné que les coûts étaient plus chers. Si tu leur donnes plus de valeur aux coûts, c'est certain que peut-être que l'alternative 3A, par exemple, pourrait être numéro 1 à ce temps-là, tu sais. Donc, c'est ça. Non, c'était la ligne mauve, là, ou rose, là, c'est ça, le 3A, la ruiniste.
C'était la moins dispendieux.
Je ne sais pas quelle était la moins dispendieux, je ne m'en rappelle plus, mais c'est celle-là qui arrivait souvent deuxième dans l'analyse.
Bon, bien là-dessus, je te remercie bien gros.
Ça fait plaisir.
On va souhaiter que le projet se termine avec succès et qu'on va pouvoir finalement procéder à l'expansion, à l'élargissement d'une route qui va être plus adéquate pour tous les usagers ici dans Clarence-Rockland.
On l'espère bien.
Et, dans le fond, restant des comtés unis.
Oui, aussi, oui. Tu as des gens qui te plantaient. Oui, exactement. Oui, certains, oui. Il y a un autobus. Il y a un autobus qui part. Oui, c'est ça.
C'est ça.
On l'espère bien.
Merci.
Merci. Ouais.
Bon, donc, mesdames et messieurs, malheureusement, il y a eu beaucoup de bruit ici ce soir et je ne suis pas certain du résultat. Il va falloir, en termes d'image, en termes de son, en termes de lumière, car ici, la lumière est plus sombre qu'on aurait aimé et on ne pouvait pas mettre de lumière car on aurait aveuglé les conférenciers, les gens qui faisaient les présentations. Alors, nous vous présentons ceci avec beaucoup d'humilité et en espérant que ça pourrait en retirer au moins un peu d'informations. Car c'est un projet qui nous est important à nous, les résidents ici de la cité de Clarence-Rockland et pour les villes, les villages avoisinants. Sur ce, ici Jacques Tessier des Chevaliers-Colons qui vous transmet cette réunion d'information pour l'élargissement au autre site pour de la 174 la 17. Merci d'avoir été là avec moi.
En 1867, par un matin d'été, le 1er juillet, notre pays est né.
Les pères s'entendirent sur l'avenir de la nation pour que tous et chacun puissent chanter ton nom.
D'une famille de 4 à 10, nous sommes